"I sold your car," my mother said while sipping tea, like she hadn't just ripped away my last connection to my dead husband. "You won't need it where I'm taking you," she added, flipping through a brochure for a retirement home. I'm 44, not 80, and yet, just weeks after Michael's funeral, I'd lost my husband, my autonomy, and now my freedom, casually erased with a smirk and a transaction. But what she didn't know is that Michael left something in that glove box, something she forgot, something that might just blow the carefully constructed world she's been building right out of her hands. I stared at her, unsure I'd heard her correctly. The teacup in her hand clinked gently against the saucer as she set it down, entirely unbothered by what she'd just announced. "You sold my car?" I repeated, my voice thinner than I intended, like it didn't quite belong to me. Margaret didn't look up. "It was just sitting there, and with Michael gone, you don't need it anymore. Besides, I got a good price for it." 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since the funeral. 14 days since I stood in black, burying the man who had been my rock, my reason, my partner in everything. And now I was standing in my childhood kitchen, stripped of a future, a husband, and now, apparently, my car. My car wasn't just transportation. It was where Michael and I sang off-key to 80s ballads on late-night drives. It was where we argued about directions, where we made up in the silence that followed. It still smelled faintly of his aftershave. But all of that meant nothing to my mother. To her, it was a burden. "I was going to need it to get back to work," I said, though I already knew it was pointless. I didn't have a job to go back to yet. I had taken a leave of absence from the hospital. Grief had that effect. It stole not only people but purpose. Still, I needed the option. I needed to know something was still mine. Margaret finally looked at me, her expression unreadable but firm. "You shouldn't be working right now, Linda. You need rest, time to transition into a simpler life. This house has space. I can take care of things. You can focus on healing." Her words sounded sweet, but the undercurrent chilled me. Transition? Simpler life? What she really meant was dependence, control. I hadn't lived under this roof since I was 19. Now, at 44, I was back under her thumb, and she had wasted no time making decisions for me. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "You didn't even ask me," she waved it off. "You were overwhelmed. Still are. It was a practical decision. I've already set the money aside in a new account I created for you. It's all handled." I almost laughed. Handled. Like I was a toddler too fragile to manage my own affairs. As if grief had robbed me of competence, as if losing Michael had turned me back into the rebellious girl she'd once tried to mould and failed. Something inside me clenched hard. It wasn't just the sale, it was the ease with which she had erased me from my own choices. The assumption that I'd just go along with it, say thank you, be grateful. "I would have liked to have been consulted," I said quietly, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. Margaret softened just enough to be patronising. "Oh, sweetheart, I know this is hard. That's why I'm here, to take these things off your plate. You don't need to worry about anything anymore." That was the exact problem. I turned away from her and looked out the kitchen window. The driveway, where my car used to sit, was now empty. A hollow space. It mirrored how I felt inside. Something once present and vital was now simply gone. Margaret followed my gaze. "You'll see this was for the best. The car was just a symbol, Linda. You need to let go." But I wasn't ready to let go, not of Michael, not of my autonomy, not of the life I had spent 2 decades building. I had returned to this house for refuge, not surrender. But clearly, to Margaret, they were the same thing. Without another word, I walked out of the kitchen and into the hallway, needing space to think, to breathe, to figure out what pieces of my life were still actually mine, and what else she'd already decided to erase. I had barely made it halfway down the hall when Margaret's voice floated after me, calm and clipped. "I printed out something I want you to look at. It's a plan for your future." I stopped, hand hovering over the stair rail. A plan? When I turned, she was already at the dining table, unfolding a thick packet of papers like a realtor laying out property deeds. "I've been speaking with a consultant," she said. "He specializes in elder transition planning." I blinked. "Elder? You're not old," she rushed to clarify. "But after everything, Michael's death, your burnout, the job, this might be a chance to reset, start fresh, somewhere with structure and support." She pushed the papers across the table. The words at the top made my stomach turn. "Welcome to Silver Pines, independent and assisted living community. You want me to move into a retirement home," I said flatly. "It's not what you think. There are art classes, community events, transportation is provided, you'd have your own space, and it's only 20 minutes from here." I didn't sit. Couldn't. "I'm 44, she offered a soft, condescending smile, "which is exactly why we should do this now, before your health declines or things become harder." My voice rose despite me. "I'm not dying, and I'm not helpless." "I never said you were," she replied too smoothly. "But you need help. You've been through a trauma. It's easy to make poor decisions in grief. That's why I've taken certain steps." "What steps?" She lifted another paper, a banking document. "I've opened a financial account in your name, tied to my own, so I can help you manage. I transferred the money from the car sale, along with some of your savings, so everything is consolidated." My head spun. "You did what?" "It's for your own good. I'm your mother. Someone has to look out for you." "I never asked you to." Margaret sighed, like I was the child being difficult. "You're not thinking clearly. That's okay. I am." "No, what you are is controlling," I snapped, the words sharp and unfiltered. "You sold my car without asking, you're managing my money without permission, and now you're planning to ship me off to a retirement home like some senile patient." She narrowed her eyes. "I am doing what's necessary because you clearly can't." And then she said it, the line that gutted whatever was left of my restraint. "Linda, you're a burden." The room tilted. My knees locked. I stared at the woman who raised me, who once packed school lunches and kissed scraped knees, and now saw me not as her daughter, but as a weight she was trying to shift. I didn't cry. I went cold. "You've made this about convenience, not care," I said, voice low and trembling with restrained rage. "You're not helping me. You're removing me." She didn't deny it. I walked past her, down the hall, into the guest bedroom she'd designated for me. I locked the door. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, not from grief this time, but humiliation, rage, realization. I opened my laptop, checked my old online banking account. Access denied, password incorrect. I tried again and again. I grabbed my phone, opened my notes app, my backup codes, typed them in, locked, temporarily disabled. I sat back in the chair, breath caught somewhere between panic and nausea. Margaret had done more than manage my money. She had taken over it, entirely. I rummaged through my overnight bag for the small folder Michael had given me before his final hospital stay. "Just in case," he had said, with his signature calm. "Keep this close." Inside were scanned copies of our joint assets, everything in both our names. Except one item stood out, an account listed only under my name, but last updated by a user ID I didn't recognize. I checked the fine print. Margaret C. Winters, Authorized Secondary Administrator. I stared at the paper, blood draining from my face. She had positioned herself not just as my caretaker, but as my proxy. Somewhere in the middle of morning I had stopped being her daughter. I had become her project, and I had no intention of letting her finish it. The morning light cut through the blinds in narrow lines, striping the walls of the guest room like prison bars. I hadn't slept. My mind churned all night, looping Margaret's words, her plans, the realization that my autonomy had been surgically removed without a single drop of anesthesia. I needed to breathe. I pulled the old leather suitcase Michael had taken on every anniversary trip from under the bed. Something about it had comforted me in recent days. His scent still clung faintly to the lining. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. Inside, his clothes lay folded neatly, like he meant to return. I reached beneath the shirts and found a worn envelope taped to the interior lining. My breath caught. On it, in Michael's steady mechanical handwriting, "If anything happens, check the glove box." I froze. The glove box. Of the car Margaret had sold. I ran my fingers over the words, my heart pounding. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It wasn't me overreacting. Michael had seen this coming. He had planned for it. And now the one person who had tried to protect me was gone. His warning reduced to a note buried beneath forgotten clothes. I needed help. Someone I could trust. My fingers hovered over my phone screen before landing on a name I hadn't dialed in years. Diana Holloway. Michael's best friend since college, his confidant. A woman who had once shared war stories with me about law school and marriage in the same breath. She'd moved across town after her retirement, and though our connection had faded, Michael had never stopped trusting her. She picked up on the second ring. "Linda?" Her voice was sharp with surprise. "Diana, I know it's early. I'm sorry." "No, don't apologize. Are you okay?" "I don't know," I said, and my voice cracked in a way I hadn't allowed it to since the funeral. Michael left me a note. It said to check the glove box if something happened. A pause, then low and calm. Did he mention me? He said nothing else, just the note, but I remember he told me once, if I was ever unsure, I should talk to you. She inhaled slowly. "Do you have 10 minutes to talk? Because there's something I've been holding for him, something he made me promise to deliver only if things got out of hand." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Margaret," she said bluntly. Michael didn't trust her. He worried she'd try to control everything once he was gone. Said she was the only person who could take your voice away without raising suspicion. He gave me a sealed envelope, told me to wait until the signs showed. "And you think they've shown?" "I'd say she's selling your car, moving your money, and planning your relocation to Silver Pines counts, don't you?" My breath shuddered out of me. "I need to see you," I whispered. "I'll be there in 30. She hung up before I could thank her. I sat for a long moment staring at the phone. A strange calm settled over me. Not peace, more like clarity. The fog of grief and confusion had lifted just enough for the edges of the truth to show. Margaret had planned this. Or at the very least, she had waited for the perfect storm, my husband gone, my mind numb, my spirit cracked, and into that void she had slipped her hand, not to help me up but to take the reins. But Michael had known, he had seen it, and he had trusted Diana to help me finish what he couldn't. By the time the doorbell rang, I was waiting at the front door, envelope in hand. I opened the door before she knocked. Diana looked exactly the same, older maybe, but with the same no-nonsense expression, silver hair pulled into a tight bun. She didn't waste time. "I have it," she said, pulling a worn manila envelope from her leather bag. "He gave me this 3 months ago, said it was only to be opened if Margaret started playing puppet master." I reached out, but she held it back for a moment, searching my face. "Are you sure you're ready?" I nodded. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I took the envelope from Diana, my fingers trembling slightly. It felt heavier than it should have. Symbolic, maybe, like all the weight I'd been carrying had just transferred into that rectangle of paper. We sat at the dining table. Diana gave me space. No rush, no urging, just presence. I opened the flap. Inside was a small brass key and a folded letter sealed with wax, the kind Michael used for birthday notes and secret anniversary surprises. I broke it carefully, unfolding the crisp page, and recognised his handwriting immediately. "My dearest Linda, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Margaret has started doing exactly what I feared she might. I never wanted to put you in the middle of this, but I couldn't leave you defenceless, The brass key is to the safety deposit box at First National Bank, box number 42B. Inside, you'll find what you need to reclaim your life, and the one I worked hard to build for us quietly over the years. I never trusted your mother. I didn't say it often, but you knew. You saw it. The way she always smiled with one side of her mouth when she disapproved, the way she used concern as control. I didn't want to believe it then, but I know it now. If I left you vulnerable, she'd pounce. Don't let her. The car, our car, has what I called the map. That's what you used to call it, remember, when we planned our first road trip to Oregon. You wanted me to draw a map by hand, so I did, but I kept drawing maps for everything after that. Investments, long-term plans, property sketches. I kept the most important one in the glove box, in case you needed it. Find it, use it, reclaim everything, not just the assets, but your voice, your power, your story. With all my love forever, Michael. I stared at the words long after the ink stopped. The map, the glove box, First National. He had been preparing for this, protecting me in the only way he could. Across the table, Diana was quiet. I remember, I said softly. He told me once, I don't trust your mother. I thought it was just frustration, the way families clash. Diana gave a small, knowing nod. Michael was never casual with words. If he said it, he meant it. I leaned back in the chair, holding the key tightly. My thoughts raced, not with fear, but with direction. Michael hadn't left me drifting. He'd given me coordinates. I have to find the car. Diana raised an eyebrow. Do you know who bought it? I shook my head. Margaret handled everything. We can start with the DMV, if you can remember the plate number, or at least the VN. I might still have friends there. I nodded, brain already reaching back. Michael had made me memorize the plate. You should always know the number, he'd said, in case anything ever happens. I recited it aloud, and Diana smiled. Perfect. I'll make some calls. I stood up, needing to move. My limbs buzzed with a strange cocktail of adrenaline and clarity. She thought she was closing a chapter, selling the car, moving the money, deciding my future. But she didn't realize that the car was the beginning, Diana finished, her voice soft but firm. I looked at the key again, gold, cold, and humming with purpose. Whatever Michael left in that glove box, it's mine, and I'm getting it back. Diana grinned, the fire of old legal battles flickering in her eyes. Let's go find your map. The next morning, after 2 mugs of coffee and barely 5 hours of sleep, I dialed the number I hadn't used in over a decade. Linda Winters, I said when the line picked up. Is Tom Nguyen still around? The woman on the other end paused, then chuckled. Still here, still cursing at old printers. Hang on. A brief rustling, a muffled shout, then a familiar, gravelly voice barked through the speaker. Well, I'll be damned. Linda? Hi, Tom. Well, if it isn't Nurse Nightshift herself, what do I owe this blast from the past? I need a favour, I said, not bothering with pleasantries. It's about a car. He sighed, like he already knew it would be complicated. What kind of favour? I gave him the plate number, the VIN, the make and model. He listened silently. I'm looking for where it went after it was sold. My mother handled the transaction without my consent. You mean Margaret? Yeah. He gave a low whistle. She's still got that steamroller style, huh? Worse, I said. Give me an hour, he replied, and don't tell me where you got this info. Of course not. True to his word, Tom called back 45 minutes later. I picked up on the first ring. Toyota Camry, dark blue, transferred to a private party 3 days ago. Buyer's name is Walter Branson, retired school principal, lives out in Pine Hollow about 3 hours north. Did he register it yet? Nope. That's the weird part. Title transfer was filed but hasn't been completed. He probably hasn't gotten around to the DMV run. Might still have the car just sitting there. My pulse jumped. Do you have an address? Tom hesitated. You're not going to confront the guy, are you? Of course not, I lied. He sighed again, then gave me the address. Be careful, Linda. You always had a fire in you. Don't let it burn you now. Thanks, Tom. Really. I hung up and looked across the table at Diana, who had listened quietly throughout the call. She raised an eyebrow. Pine Hollow? I nodded. 3 hours. Let's pack snacks. The drive out of Denver was quiet at first. I watched the city fade into rolling hills, then open plains, and eventually thick clusters of pine trees as we climbed into higher altitude. Pine Hollow was a sleepy town that seemed frozen in time. There was a single diner, a hardware store, and rows of aging houses with wraparound porches and wind chimes clinking softly in the breeze. Walter's house was easy to find, a modest 2-story cottage with a red mailbox and a Toyota Camry parked neatly in the driveway. There it was, my car, our car. I pulled over across the street and stared at it. It looked exactly the same, except now it didn't belong to me. You okay? Diana asked. I'm not sure. We got out of the car, walked up the stone path, and rang the bell. It took a full minute before the door opened. Walter Branson looked exactly like someone who had once terrified 8th graders with detention threats. Tall, dignified, thinning white hair, eyes sharp and observant. But when he saw us, his expression softened. Can I help you, ladies? I stepped forward. My name is Linda Winters. I believe you recently purchased a blue Camry from a woman named Margaret Winters. He nodded. Yes. She said it was her daughter's. Her late son-in-law's, actually. I bought it for my granddaughter. She's graduating next month. I swallowed hard. That was my car, my husband's car. My mother sold it without my consent. Walter blinked. I see. I rushed to add, I'm not here to take it back. I know that's not how transactions work, but there's something in the glove box, something important that belonged to my husband. I need to retrieve it before the car is moved or transferred. He studied me for a long beat, then opened the door wider. Well then, he said, let's see what's in the glove box. Walter led us into his garage, where the Camry sat clean and untouched, the keys resting on a workbench beside a coiled garden hose. He walked over, picked them up, and handed them to me without hesitation. Go ahead, he said quietly. If it were my late wife's car, and someone sold it out from under me, I'd want the same chance. Thank you, I whispered. My fingers curled around the keys like they were sacred. I opened the driver's side door and slid in. The familiar scent, faint leather, Michael's cologne, hit me like a wave. My throat tightened, but I held it together. I reached for the glove box. My hand hesitated for a beat. Then I opened it. Inside, perfectly placed and untouched, were 3 items. A small black USB stick in a plastic case, a leather-bound notebook tied with twine, and a folded sheet of white paper with Linda, only open when you're ready, written in Michael's handwriting. My breath caught. I touched each item like they might vanish under pressure. Diana stepped closer. What is it? I passed her the USB, then untied the notebook. Inside were pages and pages of Michael's handwriting, diagrams, account summaries, building layouts, addresses. It wasn't a journal, it was a blueprint, a map. I unfolded the paper last. It was hand-drawn, a familiar style, like the one he'd made for our trip to Oregon. Only this one was of Denver. Dotted across it were red circles, about a dozen of them. Next to each, he'd written notes in his distinct no-nonsense scrawl, 12th and Fremont, renovation 2008, mother involved. Humboldt property, early investment, Margaret set up utilities. Lakeview duplex, shared account used, trace. Northfield, deed switched twice. Why? I blinked. Diana leaned over my shoulder. These aren't just properties. These are leads. A chill slid down my spine. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. These places weren't just assets. They were breadcrumbs, a trail Michael had left behind, linking property after property, not just to himself, but to Margaret, and not recently. Some of these went back nearly 20 years. I flipped through the notebook. Each page confirmed the pattern. Shared ownership, funds redirected, titles initially in Margaret's name before being quietly transferred. In some cases, the signatures looked off. Michael knew, I murmured. He suspected she was involved in more than just controlling behaviour. She was in the money, in the deeds, in the wiring of our entire financial life. Walter cleared his throat gently. I had no idea it was that serious. I only bought the car because Margaret said it was a family clearance. You have no reason to apologise, I said, standing. You didn't know, and you didn't do anything wrong. He nodded, then walked to a cabinet and retrieved a folder. I hadn't signed the title yet. If it means that much to you, I'll return the car. I blinked. Walter, I can reimburse... He shook his head. I lost my wife to cancer 5 years ago. If someone had tried to erase her memory, even by selling the car she loved, I would have done more than just chase them down. Take it. No payment needed. I didn't have words, just gratitude that a stranger could be more compassionate than my own mother. Outside, as I sat behind the wheel again, Diana looked at the USB. We'll need to see what's on this. I know, I said, eyes on the rearview mirror, seeing not the road behind me, but 2 decades of deception unravelling. Margaret hadn't just interfered, she'd been embedded. And now I was going to uncover everything. The following morning, we arrived at First National Bank just as the doors opened. The clerk at the front desk barely glanced at the small brass key in my hand before directing us to a private access room. Diana walked beside me in silence. There was something reverent in the air, like we were about to step into a vault of buried truth. The safety deposit room was cold and sterile. The clerk guided us to box 42B, inserted her master key alongside mine, and turned them simultaneously. The metal drawer slid out with a soft hiss. Inside was a navy blue document case bound in leather, and beneath it a thick stack of envelopes held together by a crimson ribbon. I carried everything to the small desk in the centre of the room, hands steady, heart anything but. Diana waited as I opened the case. The top folder bore the name Redwood Trust, LLC. I opened it and gasped. Inside were legal documents, stamped filings, property deeds, pages and pages listing addresses, transaction histories, asset valuations, all of them under a single company, Redwood Trust. But the owner's name on every form wasn't Michael, it was mine, Linda Winters. I don't understand, I whispered. Diana leaned in, scanning the documents quickly. Michael set this up in your name. You're the sole legal owner. Flipping through page after page, the scope became clear. There were 19 properties listed, townhomes, duplexes, even a strip of commercial buildings near downtown Denver. The total valuation, over $9 million. It didn't make sense. We'd lived modestly. We'd pinched pennies for vacations, argued over appliance replacements. Michael had always handled our finances, but I never suspected anything more than retirement savings and the house. He built this, I murmured. Quietly, all this time. Diana nodded. He was meticulous and strategic. Then she pulled out another folder, heavier than the rest. Inside were financial logs and tax filings for Redwood Trust going back over a decade. Wait, she said, pointing at a name in the corner of the earliest documents. Margaret C. Winters, CPA of record. I stared at the page. My mother's name printed neatly beside Michael's. She was the accountant, I asked, incredulous. Only for the first 3 years, Diana replied. After that, it looks like he replaced her with a firm downtown. My mind raced. Margaret had been there at the beginning. She had known Redwood Trust existed, that Michael was investing, that he had been placing everything in my name, and yet she'd never said a word. Not when he was alive, not after he was gone. Instead, she had tried to erase him piece by piece, starting with the car, then the money, and finally, my autonomy. She's known all along, I said, my voice cold. And she still tried to shove me into a retirement facility, like a piece of expired furniture. Diana didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth lay in front of us, on paper, in ink, in Michael's neat handwriting and careful decisions. He protected you the only way he could, she said softly, by making sure everything led back to you. I leaned back, absorbing it all. 19 properties. A hidden company, a silent war waged by my husband against my own mother, and I had been completely unaware until now. As we packed up the documents, I glanced at the ribbon-wrapped stack of envelopes still untouched in the drawer. I pulled them free and turned over the top one. It read simply, "For when you're ready to finish what I started." And suddenly I knew this wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about completing the story Michael had begun, and uncovering exactly how deep Margaret's influence went. Back at Diana's office, we spread the Redwood Trust documents across the long oak conference table. The polished surface vanished beneath piles of titles, deeds, and transaction reports. Diana moved with practiced precision, her reading glasses perched on her nose, flipping pages, scribbling notes, cross-referencing filings against her laptop screen. I watched her in silence, the enormity of it all still pressing on my chest like a stone.
"Here," she said suddenly, tapping a deed with her pen. "This property, Oak Ridge Fourplex on 9th Street. It was originally purchased in Michael's name, then transferred to Redwood Trust." I leaned closer. "Okay. But before that," she continued, dragging over an older paper, "it was held for 9 months under Margaret's name." I stared at the page. Her name written clearly on the title document, dated 15 years ago. "Was that common?" I asked. Diana shook her head. "No. Most of these properties were either acquired directly under Redwood Trust or transferred quickly from Michael. This one's different. It sat with Margaret for almost a year." A quiet warning bell rang in my head. "She told me she barely knew anything about the investments," I whispered. Diana gave me a pointed look. "That's clearly not true." She pulled another stack toward her. "Wait, there's more." 5 more properties showed similar patterns, early ownership listed under Margaret C.
Winters, sometimes for only months, sometimes over a year, before eventually being signed over to Redwood Trust. In each of these, Diana said slowly, she was either the temporary owner or the intermediary, which means at the very least she had full access to legal control, and depending on how the paperwork was processed, she could still have copies, maybe even leverage. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "She's been in it from the beginning," I murmured. "And not just helping," Diana added. "She may have claimed a share, at least temporarily. It's possible Michael trusted her too much in the early days." A sharp chill ran down my spine. Could she have sold something, without my knowledge? Diana hesitated. Then she pulled out a single folder from the stack, thinner than the rest. She opened it and frowned. "What?" "This property, Jefferson Duplex, was listed under Redwood Trust until 2 years ago, but I don't see any paperwork transferring it out."
"No sale deed, no record in the Trust's activity ledger. It's just gone." My mouth went dry. "Gone?" "According to county records, it was sold 18 months ago to a private buyer. But there's no indication the funds went into the trust or to your personal accounts." A beat of silence. Then I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Who signed the sale documents?" Diana turned to her screen. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Then she paused, eyes narrowing. "Margaret C. Winters," she said quietly. There it was. The twist that turned suspicion into confirmation. She hadn't just interfered in my life, manipulated my grief, or played gatekeeper to my autonomy. She had sold part of my inheritance, quietly, illegally. I slumped back in the chair, disbelief giving way to betrayal. Deep, hollow, complete.
She didn't just cross a line, I said. She erased it. Diana nodded. This isn't just family drama anymore, Linda. This is criminal. I rubbed my temples, my thoughts swirling. What if she has more? What if there are other properties she's still holding? Or worse, what if she's planning more sales? We'll find out, Diana said, her voice steady. We'll do a full audit. Every asset, every name, every transfer. We'll lock this down. But why? I whispered. Why would she do this to me? Diana didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was as sharp as glass. Because control wasn't enough. She wanted ownership. And now I had proof. The first thing I did was call the bank. I requested a meeting with the branch manager. Explained that I needed to revoke all third-party access to my personal and joint accounts. Margaret's name, I made clear, was to be removed from everything. The woman on the phone hesitated. Do you have the legal authority to... I'm the sole account holder, I cut in, and I have documentation proving that Margaret added herself posthumously, without consent, fraudulently. That shut her up. Within 48 hours, every financial tie my mother had wrapped around my name was untangled. The fraudulent shared accounts were frozen. New ones were opened with only my signature. I set up alerts on every transaction, transferred power of attorney to Diana, and placed a lock on all title changes within Redwood Trust. I even filed a petition with the county clerk to audit any properties Margaret had ever co-managed with Michael, with Diana's firm officially listed as legal counsel of record. She wasn't going to get her hands on another inch of land, not without a fight. By the end of the week, my name, just mine, was on every asset Michael had left me. It felt like I could finally exhale. But then Margaret showed up, uninvited, of course. I was sitting on the porch of the temporary rental Diana had helped me secure when her silver Lexus pulled up with the same smug precision as the woman behind the wheel. She stepped out in a tailored cream coat, hair immaculate, makeup untouched by age, like nothing had changed, as if she still believed she owned the world I was now reclaiming. "Linda," she called as she walked up the path, "we need to talk." "I think we're past that," I said, standing but not stepping forward. "Unless you're here to return the money from the Jefferson sale." Her smile flickered. "So, Diana got to you." "No, Michael got to me, long before you could." She crossed her arms. "You don't understand how vulnerable you've been, how much I've done to protect you from yourself." I barked a bitter laugh. Protect me? By selling off my property behind my back? By trying to sign me into a retirement home? By erasing my marriage one car, one account at a time? "You were unraveling," she snapped. "You could barely make a grocery list without breaking down." "I was grieving," I said, my voice suddenly quiet. "And you used that to seize control. Not out of love, but out of habit." Her face hardened. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being accurate and thorough, which is why your name is now off every financial document, every legal record, every trust associated with me. You're not my guardian, Margaret. You're not even my accountant anymore." Her jaw tightened. "You think you can handle all this? The real estate, the taxes, the legalese? You're a nurse, not a businesswoman." I took a step toward her. "I'm a widow who just discovered her mother's been committing white-collar theft in her name. So yeah, I'm handling it. With help I choose. On my terms." "You're weak," she hissed, her mask finally slipping. "You've always been weak. You cried when your cat died. You flunked driver's ed. You married a mechanic and called it ambition. Without me, you'd be..." "Free," I said, cutting her off. The silence that followed was thicker than concrete. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. "I sacrificed everything for you," she whispered. "You were supposed to..." "To what? Stay quiet? Stay small?" "To be grateful," she finished bitterly. I let the weight of that hang between us. Then slowly I nodded. "I am grateful," I said, "but not to you." I turned and walked back to the porch. My hands were shaking, but my spine stayed straight. Margaret didn't follow. When I looked back, she was still standing there, perfectly still, like she couldn't decide if she wanted to scream or crumble. I didn't wait to see which she chose. I went inside and closed the door behind me, locked it. This time I had the only key. 3 days passed before the next twist landed in my lap like a brick through a window. It arrived in a manila envelope, delivered by certified mail to Diana's office. I hadn't been expecting anything. But when Diana walked into our meeting with her face pale and jaw tight, I knew before she spoke that it wasn't good. "You need to see this," she said, sliding the envelope across the desk. I opened it slowly. Inside were a series of legal documents, some typed, some handwritten, all horrifying. The heading read, "Petition for Legal Guardianship Transfer, Adult Dependent." I blinked. What is this?" "It's a guardianship request," Diana said, "filed by Margaret, claiming you're mentally unfit to manage your own affairs and need full-time care. She's requesting the court appoint a long-term facility as your custodian, with her listed as legal coordinator." I felt like I was falling through the floor. "She's trying to have me committed?" Diana nodded grimly. "Technically not institutionalization. It's more like forced placement in an assisted living program, but with legal custody transferred, like what's done for elderly dementia patients, or minors." My stomach turned. "She's petitioning to make me her child again. That's exactly what this is." I shoved the papers aside. I couldn't look at them. Every paragraph dripped with condescension disguised as care. Erratic behaviour, poor financial judgment, emotional instability following spousal death. "She's trying to erase me," I whispered. "Legally, officially." Diana put a hand over mine. "We'll fight this." I nodded. But I wasn't just going to fight it in court. I needed to face her. That afternoon, I drove straight to her house. The home I had once grown up in now felt like enemy territory. My heart pounded as I rang the bell. When she opened the door, her expression barely changed. "Linda, we need to talk." She stepped aside. I walked in. The living room was pristine, every surface polished, every pillow fluffed. Margaret's world was one of appearances, of order. And I had just come to upend it. I tossed the documents onto her coffee table. "What the hell is this?" She didn't even glance down. "It's a safety net," she said. "You're spiralling, making dangerous choices." Listening to that lawyer friend cutting me off from accounts, someone had to step in. "You didn't step in, you stepped over the line." She folded her arms. "Don't be dramatic. You're trying to make me legally incompetent. I'm trying to protect you from yourself." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "No, you're trying to win. You're trying to silence me because I stopped obeying." Her eyes narrowed. "You've been irrational since Michael died. He was the only reason you ever functioned. Without him, you're drifting." My throat tightened. "You think I don't know I've been struggling, that I haven't felt like a shell some days? But grief is not incompetence. Pain is not a mental illness. You've made reckless decisions. You've burned bridges, alienated the only family you have left." "No," I snapped. "You did that when you forged guardianship documents, when you sold my car, my home, and tried to sell my future." Margaret stepped closer, her voice like steel. "I didn't raise you to betray me." Tears welled in my eyes. "No," I said softly. "You raised me to be afraid of you. You raised me to be small and obedient and quiet. And I tried, for so long, but I can't do it anymore." "Everything I've done was for you," she hissed. "Then why do I feel like I'm constantly disappearing?" My voice cracked. "Why do I feel like every choice I make is met with resistance? Like my pain is inconvenient for you, like my voice doesn't matter unless it echoes yours?" Margaret didn't answer. I took a shaky breath. "I don't need a guardian," I said. "I need a mother. Just a mother, not a manager, not a warden, just someone to sit with me in the pain without trying to fix or control or rewrite me." Her mouth trembled. Then, with a bitterness that chilled the room, she said, I didn't sacrifice my life to be repaid with defiance. I blinked. You didn't sacrifice your life? I whispered. You built a cage, and now you're angry I'm unlocking the door. I turned away, walked to the front door. She didn't stop me. As I reached for the handle, I paused. You know what hurts most? I said without looking back. That Michael saw this in you before I did, and he still tried to protect me, even from you. Then I walked out, leaving her in the silence she could no longer fill with control. I sat alone in Diana's office, long after she had left for the evening, surrounded by towers of paper and silence. The city outside hummed with its own rhythm, but in here time had slowed to the tick of the wall clock and the soft creak of my chair as I leaned forward. On the desk in front of me was the one thing I hadn't dared open fully, Michael's journal. It wasn't a diary, not in the traditional sense. There were no daily musings or poetic reflections. It was a blueprint, a master plan, a war map disguised as a ledger. The leather-bound notebook that had rested quietly in the glove-box now glared at me with quiet insistence. I untied the leather cord, opened to the first page, and began to read. January 12th, 2005. Today, I bought the first duplex. Margaret helped me set up the paperwork, said she'd take care of the messy parts. I don't like her tone, too much ownership in her voice. That was nearly 2 decades ago, before I even knew Michael was investing in anything, before Redwood Trust had even been named. The entries continued, methodical and precise. April 3rd, 2007. Shifted 2 properties under Linda's name today. Margaret questioned it, said Linda wouldn't know what to do with them. I told her Linda doesn't need to know right now, she just needs to be protected later. June 19th, 2011. Redwood Trust fully active. 14 properties now. Linda still thinks I only work late because of repair calls. I wish I could tell her. But the more Margaret inserts herself, the more I realise this has to be done in silence. Quiet armour, quiet war. Page after page, it unfolded. This life he had built in the background. Not for himself, not even for financial freedom, but as a fortress for me. October 8th, 2014. Margaret asked again why I keep transferring things to Linda's name. I told her, because one day you'll try to take her life from her, and I want to make damn sure she has a way to take it back. She laughed, but I wasn't joking. I paused, my hand trembling on the page. Michael hadn't just suspected Margaret's manipulations, he had anticipated them. And he hadn't just set aside savings or life insurance. He'd structured a legacy that existed like a secret army, waiting to be activated, one property at a time, one layer of protection after another. There were diagrams, flowcharts of legal entities, financial structures, trust amendments, each move carefully logged, each transaction with a reason, most of them connected to a single, steady theme: empowerment through invisibility. He had never bragged, never flaunted, never even hinted. And yet here was an empire forged from late nights, tireless weekends, and strategic silence. Near the end of the journal, the tone shifted. The writing grew smaller, tighter. February 26th, 2023. Heart pain again. Margaret doesn't know. Linda definitely doesn't. I told Diana everything. If this is the end, she'll know what to do. March 9th, 2023. Linda is tired, worn out. She thinks grief makes her weak. It doesn't. It makes her human. What makes her strong is that she keeps going anyway. Then came the final entry, short, centred. A single sentence written in darker ink, as though he wanted it to burn through the page. If Margaret turns you into an invisible child, become the kind of woman no one forgets. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. This wasn't about Margaret anymore. It wasn't even about money or property. It was about Michael's values. He had believed in my strength when I had forgotten it. He had seen my worth even when I was buried in grief, stripped of identity, reduced to paperwork and pity. He hadn't just protected me, he had honoured me by trusting me with the final chapter of his life, and now it wasn't just mine to protect, it was mine to complete. I closed the journal and held it to my chest. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about reclamation, of power, of dignity, of legacy, and I would not let it be forgotten. 3 days later, Diana called. Her voice, though calm, carried an edge I hadn't heard before. "Linda," she said, "I need you to come to the office. I've found something unexpected." The way she said it set my nerves on edge. When I arrived, she was waiting with a folder already open on the conference table. Her face was composed, but her eyes flicked up to meet mine with what I could only interpret as reluctant certainty. She turned the folder toward me. "It's about Unit 12B, one of the condos under Redwood Trust." I frowned. "The one in Park Hill? That's been vacant for years." Diana's lips pressed together. "That's what we thought. But the utility records show consistent activity for the last 16 months. Electricity, water, maintenance fees, regular and unflagged." I blinked. "So someone's living there?" She nodded, then handed me a copy of a lease agreement. My breath caught. The tenant listed was Catherine Morgan. I stared at the name, recognition slow at first, until it slammed into me like a train. That was Margaret's maiden name. The lease wasn't fake. It was legally binding. And it had been signed with authorization from an entity within Redwood Trust, linked back to a sub-company Michael had closed years ago, quietly reactivated without Linda's consent. "Wait," I said, panic rising. "You're saying my mother used a fake name to live in one of my properties?" Diana nodded grimly. "That's not all." She opened another document, this time a financial ledger. It was a breakdown of transfers made from a Redwood Trust account tied to that same sub-company, thousands of dollars every month, transferred from the main trust fund into a separate checking account under the name Clarence Allen. I didn't recognize it. But Diana had already anticipated that. She slid another folder toward me. Inside were photos. One of them showed Margaret, standing beside a tall man, grey hair, square jaw, arms slung casually around her shoulders. They were laughing, walking out of a restaurant, completely at ease. "That's Clarence Allen," Diana said. "Retired contractor, divorced, no kids, lives part-time in Unit 12B. My mouth went dry. "She's living with him?" Diana nodded once. "And using Redwood Trust funds to pay for the unit, and for expenses listed as property maintenance, which frankly includes dinner bills, travel bookings, and lingerie receipts." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't just control. This wasn't just financial manipulation or emotional coercion. This was betrayal. Margaret hadn't just tried to erase me from my own life. She had carved out a secret one for herself, funded by the legacy Michael left me. The legacy meant to protect me, the life that was supposed to be ours. I sat down hard, breath shallow. "How long?" Diana didn't have to look it up. "Since the year Michael was diagnosed." I shut my eyes. That was the same year Margaret started spending more time away from us. She claimed it was to give us space and let you two figure things out. I believed her. Michael didn't. He had made remarks, quiet ones, but I'd brushed them off. I wanted to believe my mother had matured, softened. Instead, she had been preparing for her own soft landing, one paid for with my stolen wings. The silence in the room thickened. "I don't even know who she is anymore," I whispered. Diana didn't respond. She just sat beside me, her presence solid, grounding. "It was never about me," I continued. "Not really. She didn't want to protect me. She wanted access to what Michael built, to what she thought should have been hers." Diana nodded slowly. And when she realised it wasn't, she took it anyway. I wiped my face, surprised to find tears already falling. Not rage this time, not even grief, just hollowness. There's a particular ache that comes from realising your own mother doesn't love you for who you are, but for what you represent. Control, ownership, legacy, a means to an end. I thought of Michael, of his journal, of that last line. If Margaret turns you into an invisible child, become the kind of woman no one forgets. I wasn't invisible anymore, and I wasn't a child, but right now I was a daughter mourning a mother who was still alive, and somehow that was worse. The garage smelled the same as it always had, faint oil, sawdust, and something intangible that could only be described as Michael.
It had been his sanctuary, his workshop, the one place in the world that was entirely his, and now it would become mine. I spent the morning cleaning it, carefully uncovering the workbench, wiping down the tools, aligning everything just as he had left it. I didn't alter the arrangement. That wasn't the point. I was restoring what had been dismantled, not physically, but symbolically. I sent the message to Margaret mid-afternoon. Meet me at Michael's garage. 1 hour, no lawyers, just truth. She replied within seconds. Fine. I wasn't surprised she came. Margaret never passed up a chance to control the narrative. What she didn't realise was that this time she didn't have the pen. She arrived precisely at 4, dressed in a beige suit, too formal for the space. Her heels clicked against the concrete floor as she stepped inside and looked around. You've cleaned it up, she said, her voice casual. Always was a mess. I didn't answer. I stood beside the tool rack, arms crossed, grounding myself in the presence of Michael's world. She turned to me, raising a brow. What's this about, Linda? I took a breath. This is where it started. Every property Michael bought, every plan he made, this is where he thought it through. Right here, with these tools, these blueprints, this silence. Margaret folded her arms. And it's also where he wrote that journal, I said, nodding toward the open book on the bench. The one that documents how you manipulated your way into his trust and later into mine. Her eyes narrowed. Be careful, Linda. That's a serious accusation. I'm done being careful. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. I know about the condo. I know about Clarence. I know about the funds you rerouted from Redwood Trust. I know about the guardianship papers. I know about the lies. But more than anything, I know who I am now. I stepped forward, meeting her eyes without flinching. I'm not the woman you raised to be quiet, obedient, afraid of disapproval. I'm not the daughter who tries to earn scraps of your approval. I'm the woman my husband trusted with his empire. I'm the woman you tried to erase. She sneered. Michael was a mechanic, not a king. He was more royal than you'll ever be, I said sharply, because he built everything with love, quietly, without needing credit, without hurting anyone. She looked away, just for a moment, enough to tell me that the truth had landed. You always were emotional, she muttered, and you always mistook cruelty for strength. I let the words linger. Then I said the sentence I'd been carrying like a sword. I'm no longer someone you can control with fear. The silence was heavy, and this time it was mine. I gestured toward the door. There's nothing else to say. You may have started this war, but I ended it with facts, with truth, with voice. Margaret didn't move for a beat. Then, with a sharp exhale, she turned and walked out, heels echoing like a gavel. I didn't watch her leave. I just turned back to the bench, picked up Michael's wrench, and placed it exactly where it belonged, right under the window, where the light always hit just right. The next morning, I delivered the envelope. No confrontation, no stage, just clarity. Inside it was everything. A printed dossier Diana had compiled, outlining the Redwood Trust's holdings,
bank transfers, legal filings, and every unethical action Margaret had taken in my name. Not accusations, evidence. Alongside it, a brief letter, typed, not handwritten. I've closed every access point. The trust is now solely mine. The condo has been reclaimed. Clarence has vacated. Any further legal contact must go through my attorney. I won't take this to court unless I have to. But if you come near my accounts, my life, or my freedom again, I will finish what you started, publicly. I left the letter on her front porch, sealed with nothing but finality. That night she didn't call, she didn't show up, and in the following days not a whisper from her world reached mine. It was over, not with fireworks or courtroom drama, but with something quieter, stronger, control reclaimed. I packed my few belongings from the rental and returned to the home Michael and I once shared, the house she had tried to convert into a ghost of our marriage. The one she once told me was too much for a grieving widow. I opened the windows, let in the light. I painted the walls myself, replaced the curtains. I dragged out the old record player Michael loved and let Springsteen fill the halls again. I slept in the middle of the bed, ate dinner on the floor, lit candles without waiting for guests. I spoke to him at night, sometimes aloud, sometimes just in the silence. Not because I needed answers anymore, but because I wanted him to know. I found it. The voice you left for me. Weeks passed. Then one morning, I drove to Margaret's house for the last time. I didn't knock. I didn't go in. I just slipped a single envelope under the door. Inside, one simple handwritten note. I forgive you, but I will not forget. Linda. No return address, no signature flourish, just the truth. I wasn't erasing her. That was never the point. Erasure was her weapon, not mine. But I wouldn't carry her shadow forward either. This was my beginning, not born from vengeance, but from reclamation. I stood on the porch for a moment longer, breathing in the crisp air. And then, without looking back, I walked to the car, keys in hand, the road ahead, finally, fully mine.